Now, tomorrow, your campaign will kick off a week of efforts to amplify the messages from the debate. These include traditional TV, advertising, mobilizing surrogates, and social media creators. Debate watch parties and an observation tomorrow of the second anniversary of the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade. Talk about why these events surrounding the debate are so critical.
Look, Reverend, voters are beginning to tune in, and it's a priority of this campaign that we make sure that they have in front of them ways to be able to see the contrasting vision that the vice president laid out that I mentioned in my first answer here tonight. And so our campaign is doing everything we can to make sure that we're getting in front of these voters where they are and communicating with them. We're very proud about the robust efforts. We just hired our 1,000th staffer in battleground states. We've opened over 300 offices. Meanwhile, we see none of that on the Trump side of the ledger. But again, it's really important that we do this so that American voters who are tuning in see the vision, one of revenge, resentment, and violence under Donald Trump, and one where President Biden and Vice President Harris are fighting for them every single day.
Now, you heard it from the vice president earlier, that one of the goals of the debate is to draw a contrast between these two men and what they hope to accomplish in a second term. That means listening to President Biden, but also listening to Trump, because he has a lot to say. Much of it is so ridiculous, it's tempting to tune him out. Here's something Trump said last night in Philadelphia while supposedly reaching out to black voters.
I said, Dana, I have an idea for you to make a lot of money. You're going to go and start a new migrant fight league. Migrants, only migrants. And then at the end of the year, the champion migrant is going to fight your champion. And I hate to tell you, Dana, I think the migrant might win. That's how tough they are.
We don't know what version of Donald Trump will show up at the debate Thursday. But if it's this one, how does President Biden respond to something like that?
And I think President Biden is going to have the conversation and take it directly to Trump about why he continues to do this. I mean, that clip you just saw, it's demoralizing. It's dehumanizing. Donald Trump has spent his entire career, his entire life dehumanizing, demoralizing people because that's the only way he sees to be able to lift himself up is punching down on the most vulnerable. We've seen him in his approach to immigration, separating families, putting kids in cages. This isn't about solving immigration. It's not about being tough on the border. It's a dog whistle. That's all Donald Trump knows how to do. And President Biden is going to call him out on that. He has no real policies. His policies are anti-American. That's not who we are. And President Biden is going to make sure that he reinforces that on the stage. But it is clear Donald Trump does not care about anybody but himself. And he will do whatever it takes, including break the law, to make sure that he gets what he wants. And I think that that's the conversation and the contrast that voters are going to see play out on the debate stage.
Before I let you go, NBC News caught up with former President Trump in Philadelphia. He said he knows in his mind who his vice presidential pick will be, and they will be at the debate on Thursday. Now, NBC News has previously reported the field has narrowed down to Senators J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, as well as North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. It does not seem as though any women or African Americans are still being considered. From the Biden campaign perspective, how much does Trump's VP pick matter in this race?
It's not shocking that there's no African Americans, no women being considered, given who the candidate is. But it does not matter to us who Donald Trump's VP pick is or who he selects, because at the end of the day, Donald Trump is a narcissist. He only wants somebody that is going to stand by his side and placate him. And they're going to stand on the same divisive agenda that Donald Trump is promoting, one of political violence, one of ripping away freedoms in this country, particularly reproductive freedoms, one where they continue to dehumanize and demoralize black and brown people across the country and the globe. And so regardless of who Donald Trump picks, our outcome and our approach is going to be the same, because we're fighting against the same thing. It's MAGA extremism at its worst with Donald Trump at the helm, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're drawing that contrast against Donald Trump himself, and the vice president looks forward to drawing that contrast to whoever he picks for his eventual VP nominee.
Now, Quinn, you are one of the heads of the campaign, deputy campaign manager, and you're also obviously a black man, and we all know you. How do you look at these black rallies that Trump has had, Detroit, yesterday Philly, when blacks don't show up? These are mostly white audiences that are called black rallies.
I think it's demeaning, but again, I was going to say the same thing, Reverend. Black people have to show up for these to be black rallies, and Trump continues to throw the word black on things because he thinks that it will somehow fix his problem. But at the end of the day, we're very clear. The African-American community knows who Donald Trump is. The only thing that went up for African Americans while Donald Trump was in office was anxiety. Donald Trump left African Americans more uninsured. He left them more unemployed, and he continues to double down. He continues to say hateful things, and he continues to have racist dog whistles across his campaign. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're talking to Americans, not just about the vision that President Biden and Vice President Harris have for black Americans, but about the destruction that Donald Trump brought to black America and will continue to do so if he gets another 4 years in the White House.